A convicted killer many people believe was wrongly convicted. Adnan Syed in prison for the murder of his ex-girlfriend. Today, two of Adnan's best friends pick apart the investigation that put him behind bars. 18-year-old Woodlawn High School student Hae Min Lee had been murdered. Found strangled and buried in a shallow grave in Baltimore's Leakin Park.
I was scared. I had no idea why things like this would happen to somebody that I cared about so much.
Cops first look at the man who found Hae's body and Hae's current boyfriend, but both were eventually cleared.
Soon, police receive an anonymous call suggesting they take a closer look at Hae's ex-boyfriend, Adnan Syed. They subpoena Adnan's cell phone records, which eventually lead investigators to Jay Wilds. Jay is the alleged weed dealer and acquaintance of Adnan's who borrowed his car the day Hae went missing. Crime Watch Daily contributor defense attorney Mike Cavalluzzi describes the case-changing bombshells Jay was about to drop on investigators.
Jay claims that Adnan actually told him in the weeks prior to Hae's disappearance that he was going to kill her because she had dishonored him, embarrassed him, rejected him.
Jay goes on to tell detectives that after Adnan actually killed Hae, Adnan manipulates him into helping bury the body, threatening he'd tell the cops about Jay's alleged drug dealing.
Adnan specifically tells Jay that he is going to give Jay his car. He's going to go to school that day, tell Hae that he needs a ride home, and when he gets into Hae's car, he is going to kill her. Shortly after that, in the afternoon, Jay claims that Adnan actually calls him and tells him, "Pick me up at the Best Buy." Just as he's instructed, Jay goes to the Best Buy and meets up with Adnan, and they walk over to Hae's car. Before opening Hae's trunk, Jay says Adnan says to him, "Are you ready for this?" The trunk then pops open, and there she is. Jay describes the body as being lifeless, twisted up like a pretzel, and Hae's lips as being blue, indicating to him that she's dead.
Jay tells cops they go back to his house to get shovels, then go to Leakin Park, where he watches Adnan dig the grave and bury Hae's body. But friends had heard Hae tell Adnan she couldn't give him a ride that day. So is Jay's account true? Within hours of Jay's interview, Adnan Syed was arrested.
My friend Laura was paging me 911, 911, and I called her back and she was just hysterical. They had the wrong guy. She said they arrested Adnan.
Adnan told police the day was unremarkable. Nothing stood out, saying he went to school, then lent his car to Jay, went to the library, track practice, then brought his father dinner at the mosque.
But detectives would soon piece together a timeline to the contrary, based on Adnan's cell phone records and pings. They traced him to the towers near where Hae was allegedly killed, the Best Buy, and where she was buried, Leakin Park. And with Jay's corroboration also establishing a time of death, between 2:15 and 2:36.
He, immediately said, "I didn't do this. This isn't me, it's gonna be okay." He was trying to reassure me that justice would prevail.
When he got arrested, kids at Woodlawn were told not to contact him. He was told not to contact anyone because things that he could write or say could be used against him.
But there was one person from school who would reach out, Asia McLean.
The day after Adnan was arrested, she writes a letter to him in jail saying she saw and talked to him at the library around 2:30, during the window cops believe Adnan was killing Hae.
And Adnan actually has an alibi witness. She saw Adnan at the library and they spoke for about 15-20 minutes.
The following day, Asia writes a second letter. But Cristina Gutierrez, Adnan's attorney, never reaches out to her then or ever. As the investigation continued, Jay Wilds talks to cops 3 more times, reportedly each time changing his story.
Law enforcement, they like Jay's story. They develop Jay's story. They use Jay's story.
Allegedly, Jay, during those meetings with detectives, changes his story to match the cell phone pings he was shown. Pings which would show where Adnan's phone was that day.
Eventually, Jay accepts a deal from the DA and pleads guilty to accessory after the fact of Hae's murder. He would become the star witness for the prosecution.
Jay falsely confessed as an accessory to murder, so he could make a deal so he couldn't serve any time. So I personally think that, the prosecution, the detectives, put him in a position where it was either him or Adnan.
During a search of Adnan's house, cops find a breakup note Hae had written him a couple of months before her murder. A note he had taken to school and was passing back and forth with a friend. What was interesting to cops, what they say Adnan wrote on the back: "I'm going to kill."
They were in some sex education class. This was in reference to abortions, which is a bad joke, but they're teenagers, dumbass teenagers, so what do you do?
They got back together after that, so it's not like this was their final breakup. They reconciled even after that was written.
10 months later, the case goes to trial. The prosecution was led by Kevin Urich. Just a few days in, something bizarre happens.
The judge accuses Adnan's lawyer of being a liar and then realizes the jury has heard him.
And although an exact account of what was said between the judge and defense counsel is unclear, a mistrial is declared. Less than a month later, the second trial begins.
There are three key areas where the prosecution focuses its evidence. Number one, the relationship between Adnan and Hae, the fact that it was forbidden by both of their families, and the fact that it ended very suddenly and very embarrassingly for Adnan. Secondly, they focus on cell phone records and see where cell phones are pinging in order to determine where Adnan is at certain parts of the day. And lastly, they depend on the testimony of Jay.
And at trial, a very specific timeline would be introduced. The prosecution believed Hae had been murdered within a 21-minute window between 2:15 when school let out and 2:36 when Adnan called Jay.
Reportedly, in those 21 minutes, they believed Adnan and Hae left Woodlawn. He strangled her in the Best Buy parking lot, put her in the trunk, then with Jay went to Leakin Park to bury her. A theory corroborated by Adnan's cell phone records and cell tower pings.
More fascinating than the evidence that is presented at trial is actually the evidence that's missing from the trial, and that is physical evidence. There is no physical evidence connecting Adnan to Hae's disappearance and murder, and that is extraordinary. No fingerprints, no hair fibers, no blood, no weapon, no anything. They do not conduct DNA testing on substances that are found under Hae's fingernails.
Reportedly, there were items like a rope, a bottle, and some feathers found near her body.
None of those items were tested against anyone else other than Adnan, and they did not match him. They had tunnel vision on Adnan.
Krista, good friends with both Hae and Adnan, was called to testify for the prosecution. She says her story was cherry-picked. Only the parts which served the prosecution were used.
I can only take what my experience was with the detectives when I spoke with them, and to me they were, very focused on trying to fill in the blanks of a story, and if what I said didn't quite fit in, somehow that might get left off of the story. Just dealing with in the trial, they were so focused on, oh well, Adnan asked Hae for a ride and so he had to have killed her. And well, the second part of that, had somebody asked on the stand, they would have known that he didn't end up getting a ride with her because something came up. But it's how the prosecution was able to frame the questions, and that this is, the defense had no idea what the rest of the story was because that wasn't included in the police notes.
The trial lasts 6 weeks, and within a few hours, the jury finds Adnan Syed guilty of all charges, including kidnapping and first-degree murder. The 19-year-old is sentenced to life plus 30 years.
I think it's clear in reviewing this trial that Adnan's lawyer failed in many, many ways and absolutely created a perfect ineffective assistance of counsel argument on appeal. It starts with that alibi witness, Asia McClain. In her own handwriting, in her notes at the time that she was investigating this case, she has Asia's name written down, that she saw Adnan, but she never follows up.
Coming up, the defense doesn't follow up, but we do. The untapped alibi, Asia McClain.
I wish I could be that one person that could say he's innocent.